Hello and welcome back to the Loyal Sun Show. That's at the Loyal Suns, wherever you get your social media. Follow us here and follow us there for Pitt sports content you will not want to miss. If you love that September is right on the horizon and hate the enshittification of everything impacting the sport that we love, this is the place for you. The Loyal Sun Show, a safe, sunshiny place for your Pitt athletics fix. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this week we are going to get right to it because we have an extremely special guest for all of you. With the season preview right around the corner next week, we thought it would make sense to take a step back before we get into the X's and O's, the Jimmies and Joes, to discuss from a 30,000 foot view Pitt's place in the college football universe. And we brought on someone who would be better than maybe anybody on the planet to talk about that. From Split Zone Duo, joining us this week is Alex Kirshner. Alex, how are you doing today?
David, Squid, it is great to be here. I've enjoyed getting to know you guys over the internet waves over the past handful of years, and great to finally be on the program. You've been gracious enough, David, to come on our show before a Pitt game that we don't really have to talk about because we'd rather not. I believe that was Notre Dame last year. So it's good to be here with you.
And thank you again for having me on. I don't have any kids yet, so that was still the honor of my entire lifetime to be on Split Zone Duo. It's still number one. So just jumping right into it, we are talking about Pitt's place within the constantly changing universe of college football. So I wanted to talk about your bona fides to speak to it a little bit. Of course, you are a college football journalist, Split Zone Duo. You've done some work with The Atlantic. Would you like to list a few of your other publications?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me many Saturdays and Sundays, just about every, in the Pulse newsletter at The Athletic, which goes out to a lot of people. Yeah, you can read my writing about lots of non-sports stuff at Slate. And if you listen to this podcast and don't think I sound too ridiculous, you're looking for a national college football fix where one of the hosts grew up a Pitt fan, you can find us at Split Zone Duo.
So you touched on the other half of that. You grew up a Pitt fan. You are a loyal son of Pittsburgh, a graduate of Maryland. So like myself, you grew up a Pitt fan and decided to leave the state for one reason or another. So you have the national perspective, you have the Pitt perspective, and you can sort of speak to both. So I wanted to start things off by asking you, if you were to issue a state of the program address, how would you kind of summarize very generally Pitt's place in the college football universe as we head into the 2026 season?
I think Pitt is in the danger zone of falling somewhere pretty dark, but
Good start.
impressively, but there's a but impressively putting that off and finding ways to remain extremely relevant as both a college football program and an athletic department generally, despite, I think, financial trends, demographic trends in Western Pennsylvania, realignment trends nationally that are not pointing in Pitt's favor in pretty much any way. I think there's something to be said, even for the last 5 years since the ACC championship season, for the way that Pitt has been able to keep on swinging, despite a lot of things that I do think have the athletic department, the football team, in a fairly precarious situation.
So we're not the worst.
No, I mean, not even close. I mean, Pitt was playing nationally relevant college football games deep into November last year. Multiple of them, like 3 weeks in a row. Even won one of them at Georgia Tech before those couple of disasters against Notre Dame and Miami. But those were really good teams, and Pitt just wasn't quite competitive there. Pitt continues to be the kind of college football program that would show up on our national show often every year, even if I did not grow up walking around the track during games at Pitt Stadium and then going to sit at Heinz, from age, 7 onward.
Well, I mean, not the worst in the grand scheme of things. It's always nice that you pointed out there, yeah, we aren't the Blue Bloods, but we're still a notch above like some of the Big 12 bottom feeders and some other programs that are irrelevant.
No,
So
absolutely.
we're in the do or die zone almost, would you say?
I think so. Not to over ascribe importance to any one given college football season. Like Pitt had the 3-9 year a couple of years ago, and they didn't make it a trend, so that was fine. I think it's notable, like how rarely in my life Pitt has been terrible. It was really just that one year, the Phil Dracovic year. I think it was 23, where they were just like awful, unwatchably bad. But I mean, you mentioned bottom feeders. Like Pitt pretty much isn't a bottom feeder ever outside of that. They were maybe on the border of that in 2007 before they played one of the most memorable games of all time in the last game of the season that kind of rescued how people would remember that season. But definitely a cut above the worst because they are almost never among the worst.
Well, that's just how it goes. Our maybe two worst seasons of the 2000s included big ranked wins. I mean, West Virginia, obviously, but people forget that Dracovic year took down an undefeated Louisville season. So they find a way to get you back one way or another.
They very much do. This is I think kind of Pitt's manifest destiny as a program, and even when people, including me, have been frustrated by Pat Narduzzi, there's usually something. Even if you're mad about something or another, there is a saving grace, a silver lining somewhere in this experience most of the time.
Pitt pretty much isn't a bottom feeder ever. It would be an amazing tagline for Alan Green to start throwing the marketing materials. So, so we appreciate you for that stroke of genius. So let's kind of start positively because I think we would all agree that there's a myriad of factors which you just listed, which could be dragging Pitt down into the kind of forgotten zone of college football. But why has that not occurred yet? What is Pitt doing well relative to a lot of the Power Four programs that have more resources? And by resources, we of course mean cold hard cash.
Money. Yeah.
Money.
I love the way that people talk about quote unquote resources in college football. I do it too from time to time. What do we mean by that? Do we mean magic beans? Usually not. I think Pitt has a head coach who is a pretty high floor head coach. I think Pat Narduzzi is a really good ball coach. Do I think he's a especially savvy communicator or staff builder? No. Those are shortcomings that I think have been obvious at different times in recent years. But I think Pat Narduzzi is really, really good at maximizing the talent that he has at his disposal. Maybe not maximizing, but getting more out of it than your replacement level ACC or Power Conference head coach would. And we see that with a variety of developmental success stories that have kind of had different endings. We've seen it with Rasheem Miles this year, plays for Texas. Jordan Addison left his last year and played at USC. Like, they haven't always been able to hang on to these guys because of some of these money and demographic financial things that we've talked about. But Pitt, I think more than most programs in that kind of middle class of the ACC or the power conferences, turns 3-star guys into really good players really often. And that's not usually enough to win that much, like to win at the high end of the sport, because there's going to be teams that have better rosters than you. But Pat has done this really well, and a couple of famous success stories with Kenny Pickett and some of the guys who have portaled out, Addison, Biles, Kyle Lewis, obviously playing in the NFL this year. I mean, you could pick 5 to 8 of these guys off of every Pat Narduzzi roster, going back to 15 his first year or thereabouts, maybe 14, I forget. I just think he's a good developmental football coach, and he understands defense at a pretty high level. I think he better than just about anybody alive. I think he sometimes gets burned, particularly if he doesn't have the right secondary pieces to play the press quartersy variety of defense that he likes so much, or if you're matched up with an officiating crew that likes to throw a lot of flags on cornerbacks being really handsy. But I just think he's a good developmental football coach, and maybe not the highest ceiling professional college football coach, but pretty high floor because of the way that he develops talent and his understanding of defense.
So I think the question that a lot of Pitt fans have, because we recognize that he's going to turn more 3-stars or no names into guys who can potentially play on Sundays, but obviously there are so many things that give Pitt fans migraines about Pat Narduzzi. So my question to you is, do you think Pitt can do any better in its head coaching position?
Can, yes. Would, uncertain. I think if you look at Pat Narduzzi's overall resume in a decade and change at Pitt, it's an unambiguous success. It just is. Like, I think it would be a pretty solid success even without a conference championship interspersed in there. But I do think their caliber of play, their baseline, is a lot higher than it could be if they were to go out and even do a below average job hiring. You know, Pitt has not, in my lifetime, had a complete whiff of a head coaching hire. Like Todd Graham was a whiff of a character hire, I guess, and like left after a year, but I don't think would have burned down the house if he'd have stayed around. Paul Chryst, kind of a similar deal. Like didn't stay long enough that you really saw what he was, but there's a reason he got hired by Wisconsin. So I think that we haven't really seen what a truly awful Pitt head coaching hire. Mike Haywood, sorry.
I was.
We haven't really seen what a truly awful Pitt head coach on the field who's got an extended run has looked like. So it could get a lot worse. I mean, like there's no question that like at some point Pitt's just going to whiff as programs do. But I think even going back to Walt Harris, who was the first Pitt coach of my lifetime, the first Pitt coach that I remember. Actually, Johnny Majors was back for the second tour when I was like an infant, but
doesn't count.
We haven't seen what a whiff looks like. It's out there. Like, it's out there. I think Narduzzi's contract is insane. Like, I think being tied to him through 2030, buyout-wise, is bad. It's just really bad work by Heather Like. And that's not a great situation to be in. But, yeah, I mean, it could be infinitely worse. It could also be better. I'd say maybe 30% chance it was better, 40% chance it was worse, 30% chance it was about the same.
It's funny. You mentioned Narduzzi's good at getting the best out of his guys. We lose some guys to the portal like Addison and Biles, but would you rather never have guys of that caliber to lose? Because we keep some of them. Obviously, if Ohio State or Texas or USC come knocking, you're going to lose them. And then we're talking about the ceilings. We just talked about this the other day, the 25th year anniversary of Heinz Field. If you stacked up the 10 best home wins of almost any non-regular playoff team, they'd be hard to stack up against Pitt, considering all the the bad. You beat Miami, number 2, the West Virginia win. Like there's so many big moments. So
I mean, you could rattle.
It's a real roller coaster. It might not be like the ceiling is raised, but we get above the ceiling for a hot minute, then we fall back down.
2016 Penn State would have gone to the college football playoff if Pitt didn't beat that Saquon Barkley team really early in the year. You mentioned that Miami game. I remember one of my favorites from childhood. I wasn't at this game. I remember watching it on TV, but it was or maybe I was. Honestly, it blurs together which games I was at and which one I watched on TV. I literally get fuzzy about it because I was at games in those days. But the win over D'Angelo Hall, Virginia Tech, when D'Angelo Hall was suspended for the first half, great cornerback for Tech. I think it was Lusaka Polite, fullback, who carried in the winning touchdown with like a minute left against a really good Virginia Tech team. Like through the Big East, now in the ACC, like I just think that Pitt has had a really fun collection of high-end victories for just about my entire like waking life, and that's cool.
Yeah, I like the way that you use the term relevant because I think that's better than most. We could be 6-6 every year with no signature wins, and we just beat up on a couple FCS schools and beat the bottom feeders of the ACC every year, but we at least feel relevant every once in a while.
Yeah, better than can be said for a lot of programs.
But I think to play devil's advocate, you'd like to ideally break through a couple more times, even talking about within the context of our lifetimes than we have, which realistically, we had that phenomenal season in 2021. ACC champions. I frankly thought that the pollsters did a disservice to them by only finishing the season at number 13 in terms of Pitt's rank. But do you think there's anything to be said about the lack of the highest highs, or are we just meant to be a spoiler forever with a couple highlights in some otherwise pretty middling seasons?
Because I know David certainly thought our floor was raised to like a 9-win standard after that, or it should have been. Clearly wasn't.
I
But
don't think that outside of the highest spending programs that there's really a floor like that anymore. Um, I think that in a world where Pitt is going to be outspent so severely every year by a lot of the ACC, a lot of the power conference teams, I do think that spoiler that can maybe in the right year win the ACC is, and in the right year that's not going to come around often. It's probably not going to come around even every 10 years, but maybe again a time or two in our lifetimes. Yeah, like I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to aspire to, particularly because we just don't know what the future iteration of the ACC is going to be. Clemson's down right now. Are they going to be down forever? Are they going to be in the ACC forever? You could ask the very same question about Florida State, and I don't know the answers to those questions. But maybe in our adulthoods, Pitt will wind up in a conference that looks a little bit different than the one that it looks like right now, and maybe that would involve less television money, but something that was a little bit more like the Big East used to be, and maybe you could win that conference more often. I think it's a tragedy that a lot of people will only view the success of their college football programs now through the lens of whether they made the playoff, contended for national championship. Right. But also, it's not like that. It's not like that's never a possibility to at least make the playoff, particularly if this thing expands, which it will eventually, whether it's to 16 or 20 or 24 or beyond.
Yeah. I know you and your co-host Richard Johnson have spoken extensively about how one negative side effect of the playoff and its constant expansion is that it robs us of feeling joy when our individual programs reach heights or achieve achievements that are not making the playoff. And I think for a school like Pitt, that is especially difficult because it's going to take us a lot to get into the playoff, I think. Whereas it's a lot easier for other schools with a lot more money. But there are things we can walk away from that feel like victories, such as hosting game day, being the center of the college football universe for even a short period of time, whatever that Georgia Tech game was. Those are all things that I think we can walk away from and feel like there were accomplishments made in a season.
Do you know who else has that sentiment? Pat Narduzzi. I forget if it was on ACC Network or one of the radio shows he was on, and he mentioned that because he does not want to get rid of conference championship games, which might happen when the playoffs expand, because he mentioned first time around in the ACC championship against Clemson, they got their heads kicked off, but they at least made it there. And that was step one. Then step two was getting back, and then they won, and then they could believe. And if you're an old fashioned program builder like Pat Narduzzi, who isn't looking for the next hot job, and you don't have the most money to buy all the transfers, it's kind of what you need to do. Even though it's very hard, you still have to have that belief.
Well, there's this annoying thing that's happened. I have never been a believer that you need conference championship games. We've had 150 plus years of college football and maybe 30-ish at most of conference championship games. I don't think they're like an integral feature to what we do in college football. But what does the ACC have now? 17 teams?
Yes.
In football. The Big Ten's got 18. The SEC has 16. In a world where not everyone can play everybody, and where even a divisional format doesn't really work unless you want to only play intra-divisional games, which no one wants to do because you would not see a lot of your conference opponents, you kind of need a conference championship game. Or at least I think you do. I think that the reality is going to be that we're not going to have them, and there's going to be championship game or champions that are just determined on kind of pseudoscience.
And, well, you need good tiebreakers too. Let's not forget that.
Weird tiebreakers, vibes. Might literally be vibes at some point. Like we might get to a point where conferences are essentially choosing champions based on what they think is in the best interest of the league. Maybe not explicitly, but by stacking their tiebreakers in such a way that that's how it works out.
Certainly the direction they're going.
That is, I think, the exact direction that it's going. And I don't like that. I don't think that's great. And I don't like to have to defend conference championship games because I don't think they're that critical to the experience historically. But maybe now they are. with the math being the way that it maths.
Especially for a program like Pitt that is not one of the bell cow brands of an ACC, and if they have the opportunity to skip over Pitt as a championship game participant and therefore potential playoff team in favor of a Miami, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, they are going to do it.
Very much so. Yeah, it's. I don't mean to be overly conspiratorial, but I don't think it's particularly so, because we've seen a lot of conferences actually start to do this, where playoff ranking, average of certain computer ratings are used in tiebreakers. I mean, the ACC would have a nightmare if something like the Duke situation last year were to happen again, and so they're going to do what they can within reason, without being like overly discriminatory against any specific program, to make sure that if they've got a national title contender, which probably isn't going to be Pitt, that a team of that type is going to be favored in the way the tiebreakers are set up, the way the league is set up.
I couldn't agree more. Now, you mentioned that a potential future prospect for Pitt to reach its highest heights is, I forget exactly how you put it, but it was essentially if Pitt ends up in a different conference one day due to the implied implosion of the ACC, that could be good for them. And I wonder what your thoughts are on the realistic options for Pitt if one day realignment strikes again, the grant of rights expires in the ACC, something occurs that throws college football in further turmoil, and Pitt is looking for a new home. What do you think that would look like for a Pitt?
This is very much fantasy writing, like sci-fi type stuff here at this point, because there's so many variables. But I could imagine a world where sort of the non-top of the ACC, like so not Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, but where most of the rest of the ACC wound up in a league with some of the current Big 12, some of the current Big 10, like could West Virginia, Maryland, Rutgers, maybe a few others wind up in league with some class of those teams. That's one version of events. Like if there is conference consolidation, in such a way that didn't like result in teams getting kicked out of, say, the Big Ten, but resulted in sort of like some teams just going up to a new version of a super league. I think that could happen. I wouldn't put very high odds on it, also because when people talk about super leagues, they're never entirely clear on what they mean. Like some people would say we have super leagues right now with the Big Ten and the SEC. Some people would say that means like a new 30-team division that just culls the best of the power conferences. Some people would say it means a breakaway from the NCAA. It's just not really clear. But I think you can do a little bit of back of napkin math and imagine a world where only the top media rights earners wind up in league together, and the other more middling, economically speaking, power conference athletic departments wind up in their own division together. Like that's the kind of thing we could see in our lifetimes.
Something I mentioned earlier, I said it's like do or die time for Pitt, because we are in like the middle-ish tier. It's like, yeah, we're better than the G4s, but we're not the big boys. I always think first, oh, we need to win a bunch of games over the next couple of years to make a good impression and then be included. But how much does that even matter? Is it all just media rights and money and
brand recognition?
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's tough for Pitt is just good old-fashioned geography and demography.
Mm-hmm.
Like people, I think when they talk about Pittsburgh, really overstate like the whole Rust Belt thing. It's not a steel town anymore, but look at everything that was left behind, and they ignore all of the different industries, tech, healthcare, whatever, that have blown up in Pittsburgh, and all of the great things that are going on in Pittsburgh. But one area where like the demographic and the geography point is pretty true, I think, is just in college sports recruiting. Like there are just, as there's less population as time goes by in some of those old football towns, old steel towns that have tended to produce really good players for Pitt. it's not that Clairton is not going to still produce some Tyler Boyds and that Pitt is not going to still be able to get some Tyler Boyds here and there, but it's that there will be probably a couple fewer Tyler Boyds to go around over the years. And I think we've seen that with the number of power conference recruits out of the Whitfield just over my lifetime. And I think that hurts Pitt. I think that is probably Pitt's like even slightly more existential problem, along with being in an kind of an unambiguous pro sports city that makes it harder to fundraise, to get butts and seats. Like I think that Pitt can overcome, even if it is a tough financial hand, some of the Super League stuff, some of the realignment stuff. I do think Pitt is pretty challenged by the population declines in Western Pennsylvania that have filtered into youth sports, by I want to be careful about how I put it, but in some ways the lack of diversity of the city of Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania. I'm sure people would most want to hear from three white guys, three of us talking about that. Like I think those things are hard. Like those things make it harder to just build really good rosters, and it also doesn't help that Penn State is what it is and has a lot of money, and that you can't hide recruits anymore, and the national environment is what it is. But I'm actually I think Pitt's a bigger challenge is almost our old school college sports stuff more than new school. I think the new school stuff is hard and maybe puts a ceiling on what the program can be, but doesn't prevent us from having a lot of fun watching this team and Pitt fielding really competitive teams. I think is more of the base level stuff that quote unquote used to matter in college recruiting that I think still matters with Pitt.
So what you're saying is the future of Pitt is tied to how well our other co-host Dylan, shout out to him, he isn't here. It's tied to how well his son, who is named Marino, turns out as a football player.
Yes. We all need to start repopulating and moving. Those of us who have moved away need to move back. We need to start reloading the population of Western Pennsylvania a little bit more quickly and getting everyone really into football at 3 years old. And then, 2040s, 2050s, I mean, things are going to be humming if we can do that.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure on Marino Michelli, but I think the kid can handle it. It hurts me that you brought up demographics as a potential negative for Pitt, because I think a lot of us lunatic Pitt fans have convinced ourselves that our golden ticket to an invite one day to an expanded Big Ten, expanded SEC, expanded whatever is who wants that sweet, sweet Western Pennsylvania, demographic ad money, that market. Because, for so long, realignment was all about markets. And now I'm not delusional enough to think that Pittsburgh's college sports media market is as big as when the Big Ten reached for DC with Maryland. And that didn't really work, no offense. Or, Rutgers and the New York, New Jersey area, but it was the last thing. We're clinging to the cliff's edge with our fingernails here, telling ourselves what we need to tell ourselves to feel okay about the future.
Squid, are you in Pittsburgh right now?
I am.
Do you have cable or YouTube TV?
No, I do not.
Therein we have some of the problem. I keep YouTube TV during the football season, but Maryland and Rutgers would not have gotten a Big Ten invite if that was all happening today. Maryland and Rutgers got saved in a way. Not that it would have been that terrible for Maryland to still be in the ACC. I think it actually would have been better. I'm an alum. I think it might have been a more pleasant fan experience if Maryland had just stayed in the ACC. But basically what the Big Ten was doing in 2012, 2013 was trying to tax every household with cable by making their cable providers carry the Big Ten network. And it kind of worked. There was a time when the Big Ten and Fox were able to make quite a bit of money by pointing to DC and New York and being like, look, Rutgers is here, Maryland's here. We have these teams in this league. You're going to need the Big Ten network for sports fans to want to keep your cable packages. And the Big Ten was able to basically just tax at a rate of, I don't know, a couple cents or a couple bucks maximum per household every month that had cable. But now in a cord cutting world and in a world where ESPN Unlimited exists, and where every college football rights holder really has a streaming product. I just don't think that works anymore. I think it's more about brands than it is markets, and that doesn't necessarily smell great for Pitt's hopes of getting a Big Ten invitation.
All I'm going to take from this is that Yinzers either need to have big, strong babies or start subscribing to cable again.
Yes.
Okay.
Start subscribing to cable, and also just really make your voices heard that the ACC network is the most important thing in your media diet. And if you don't have it, then Comcast, Verizon, etc. will get none of your money forever.
You are, and that's exactly the case. Eric McLean is our boy. He needs to be on TV. ACC network is more important than ESPN does.
Hey, they're in Pittsburgh today. We should go down to the Southside facility and make some signs.
They do it. They do it. The ACC network has a lot of really talented people working on it. I think
they really do.
Andre Adelson, some of the best in college sports, college football writing. They do a great job, and I think that Pitt also. This is the thing I'll say about Pitt. Pitt has done a really intentional job for a long time, trying to tell its story in a way that I think can work. And it helps when you have Larry Fitzgerald coming through here, or Darrelle Revis coming through there, and Aaron Donald coming through there, when you have these kind of big ticket moments that will bring game day to town. You don't do that with good comm strategy, but I think that Pitt, in EJ Borghetti, who has since gotten a promotion, has
the greatest.
One of the best SID operations in college sports for a while. I think that would be just about universally agreed by anyone really in college football media. Pitt has done a good job trying to make itself easy to cover, make itself easy to watch, make itself easy to just access, to kind of reach out and touch. And it's hard to quantify how much that's helped the bottom line. This is not a transformative thing that's going to make you tens of millions of dollars a year in media rights revenue because your SID did a good job and you were very straightforward, open about telling your players interesting human interest stories. But I think it does help, and Pitt has pulled those levers pretty nicely for as long as I've been cognizant of it, as long as I've worked in college sports media, which is 10 years and change now, getting old.
We've said it 100 times. EJ Borghetti, the best in the business.
He really is. Yeah, he's one of the few SIDs who I really feel like I vibe with. Who I really feel like is. I
want to be his friend.
Is right, and is not spinning every time you're talking.
I desperately want to be his friend. You kind of hit the nail on the head there. Well, Alex, we'll let you go in a moment, but not before we open a whole bag of snakes first. We've talked a lot about money and realignment today, and there is some legislation being proposed in Congress right now that seeks to level the playing field and mitigate some of those factors. The Protect College Sports Act, which we've spoke pretty glowingly about on our show. I'd love to know, from your perspective, regardless of the fact that it might be a little bit of a long shot now that Congress is on recess, your thoughts on the bill and what it would mean for the University of Pittsburgh football team.
There are things about the bill that I think would make for a good and sustainable college sports system.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a respectable effort in those ways. I think it's very silly that it doesn't address the original sin of the sport, which is not giving players some kind of voice in the way their own economics and their own money are governed. I think there's a degree of time wasting that's going on here, and at some point you just have to acknowledge that players are employees and you have to jumpstart the process to collective bargaining.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is a bit ridiculous in that it doesn't quite get us there. It's a half measure, and it's not that it's not thoughtful. It's not that I don't think that the current quote unquote Wild West of college football is it's not that I don't think that's bad in some ways. It's not that I think it's sustainable, because I don't really think it's sustainable forever, at least not in a way that wouldn't turn off quite a few fans of the sport of programs like Pitt. But I think it's a bit fantastical, like a bit far-fetched to think that you are going to fix it through something that does not tag in the players to be part of their own future and that doesn't somehow end in collective bargaining. This is a system that's worked really well in other sports and has successfully insulated them from legal challenges and has resulted in games that we like to watch in football, baseball, basketball, hockey, what have you. I think it's a little silly that we're not doing that yet here in college sports.
I knew that through listening to your show that you and Richard and co-host emeritus Stephen Godfrey feel strongly about the collective bargaining end of things. I think none of us are surprised that a bill that is co-sponsored by Ted Cruz does not include that. But do you think currently, as it is written, at least in the short term, maybe 10, 15 years, that the cap that it puts on spending, the cap it puts on realignment, on transfers, is good for schools like Pitt and those who are even below our standard?
I think that if the cap circumvention is stopped, I think that's really good for Pitt. Yes. I think that if the gap between Pitt and Miami was something closer to $4 or $5 million a year on roster spend and $20 million a year on roster spend, that would be really good for Pitt. It just seems a bit far-fetched to me that this bill is going to achieve that, or that it should achieve that without having players as part of the process. Because of course those savings are it is money that's coming out of the pockets of the players. It's funny, it sounds almost a bit similar to the Major League Baseball conversation, where I'm sure that, frankly, my favorite sports team is the Pirates, and I'm probably one of the only people in PNC Park who, when I'm there, who doesn't think that the MLBPA should cave and agree to a salary cap, because I think that's letting Bob Nutting off the hook for not trying. I feel and for being incompetent at his job, being one of the worst owners in the history of professional sports. But I do think that in college football, like, Pitt's trying, like, Pitt's doing its best. So if we want to have a collectively bargain system where the players have a voice at the table, and that results in some spending restrictions that allow a program like Pitt to be more competitive for a longer period of time, and that's a collaboration between labor and capital, or labor and universities, and, cool. I could see how that could make sense. I could see how that could enrich many people's fandoms in college sports and could ultimately result in a very healthy ecosystem. But I'm not saying that this bill is like the biggest disgrace I've ever seen, because I think it's a thoughtful effort to deal with some things. I just think it's beating around the bush.
So the only surefire fix is for David Tepper to change his mind and give Pitt football $1 billion is what we're getting at.
It wouldn't hurt if someone wanted to do that. I mean, you see what it's done for Texas Tech. You see what it's done for Indiana. You see what it did even before you could pay players directly for Oregon. It can do a lot. It is all about the Benjamins.
It most certainly is. Alex, thank you so much for enlightening us today. This is, again, certainly the most intelligent conversation that has ever occurred on the Loyal Sun Show. Would you like to leave us with a record prediction for the Pitt Panthers?
7-5.
Can we talk you into 10?
Sure. I'd love that.
That was easy. Great.
I'll be listening. I'm in. What is the bull case? Where do you find 10? 10 seems like a lot to me, but I'm willing to hear it. I'd love to see it.
We're working on it.
How about
Okay. I'll tune into the next one, and see if you can walk it out. See if you can get it to 10.
We're gonna have Chris Peak on next week, and it's an annual tradition. Chris Peak
does a great job.
The greatest, the absolute greatest, and it's an annual tradition. We talk him into 10 wins. That is the season preview every year. So tune in. We're going to get you there too.
Can't wait.
Alex, thank you so much for your time today. And as always, hail to Pitt.
Hail to Pitt.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.